The Great Hall of Station Harmony had never been so quiet. For 12,000 years, the Galactic Assembly had met in this place. Representatives from 847 different alien species sat in their seats. They came from worlds of ice and fire. They came from planets with purple skies and green suns. They had built an empire of peace and trade that stretched across 1,000,000 stars. But today, all of that meant nothing. High Speaker Velo stood at the center of the hall. She was tall and thin, with skin like glass that showed the soft glow of her organs inside. She had 4 arms that usually moved with grace. Today, they trembled. Her voice came through the translator machines that turned her words into every language of the galaxy. "The swarm has returned," she said. The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. Some delegates gasped. Others made sounds of fear that their translators could not convert. A few simply went still, as if they had already died. Everyone knew the stories. The swarm was not a species. It was a force of nature. Billions of living ships that moved through space like locusts through a wheat field. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They did not even seem to hate the things they destroyed. They simply consumed. They ate planets down to bare rock. They drank oceans dry. They turned entire civilizations into fuel for their endless hunger. The last time the swarm appeared was 8,000 years ago. In just 200 years, they had erased 63 species from existence. Entire cultures gone forever. Billions of lives ended. Then, for reasons no one understood, the swarm had simply vanished. Now they were back. "Our long-range sensors have confirmed it," Bellows continued. She waved one of her hands, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a map of the galaxy's edge. Red dots covered one section like a disease. They are 18 cycles away from our outer colonies. 18 cycles until they begin feeding again. Ambassador Rova of the Pelian Consortium raised her feathered crest. The Pelians were bird-like creatures, known for their sharp minds and careful planning. "How many ships do we have?" 400,000 vessels from all member species combined. "And the swarm?" Velos paused. Her 4 hands clasped together. "Approximately 9 million. The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates from 100 worlds began shouting. Some demanded immediate evacuation of all outer colonies. Others suggested surrender. Perhaps if they offered the swarm certain planets, certain populations, the rest might be spared. A few simply wept. One delegate from a small moon called out the obvious truth. "We cannot win this fight. The numbers are impossible. We should focus on saving what we can." Many voices agreed. The Galactic Assembly had not fought a major war in 3,000 years. Their ships were beautiful and fast, built for exploration and trade. Their crews were scientists and merchants, not soldiers. Even their weapons were mostly for show. But Ambassador Rova did not join the panic. She sat very still, her large eyes moving as she thought. Then she raised her wing for silence. "There is one option we have not considered," she said. The hall slowly grew quiet. All eyes turned to the Pelian ambassador. 30 years ago, we made first contact with a new species. They came from a world we had classified as a Class 12 death world. A planet with crushing gravity, toxic oxygen atmosphere, extreme temperature variations, and predators on every landmass. By all logic, intelligent life should never have evolved there. Yet it did. She paused to let her words sink in. We called them humans. We called their world Earth, and we decided they were too primitive, too dangerous to invite into our assembly. We watched them from a distance. We studied them like scientists study dangerous animals in a cage. The delegate from the small moon laughed bitterly. "You want us to ask savages for help? They have no fleet. They have no experience with space warfare. What could they possibly offer? Rova's feathers ruffled. I have spent the last 10 years studying humans. I have watched their history. I have learned their languages. I have tried to understand how they think. She stood up, her full height impressive even among the taller species. They are not savages. They are survivors. And there is a difference. She activated her own hologram. Images appeared in the air. Humans fighting wars against each other with primitive weapons. Humans hunting animals 10 times their size. Humans building shelters in frozen wastelands and burning deserts. Humans laughing in the face of danger. Every species in this hall evolved on gentle worlds, Rova said. Worlds that nurtured us, protected us, helped us grow. We learned cooperation because our environments were kind. But humans? She shook her head. Their world tried to kill them every single day. And every single day, they killed it right back. High Speaker Velos stared at the images. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that we have spent 12,000 years learning how to avoid conflict. Humans have spent their entire existence learning how to win it. We need them, not their ships, not their technology. We need their minds. We need their courage. We need the one thing the Deathworlders have that we do not. And what is that? Velos asked. Rova's eyes were hard as stone. The inability to give up. The assembly fell silent once more. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of hope, small and fragile, but real. For the first time in 18 cycles, the galaxy had a plan. The alien shuttle looked like a silver teardrop falling through space. Commander Park Do-hyun watched it approach through the observation window of the United Earth ship Resolve. He was 42 years old, with gray appearing at his temples and scars on his hands from years of training. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war that everyone said would never come. Now 3 alien species were coming to his ship to beg for help. They're nervous, said Captain Yoon Tae-hee, standing beside him. She was young, only 28, but her eyes were sharp and steady. Their shuttle is moving slowly, making no sudden movements, like a prey animal approaching a predator. Dawn nodded. That's exactly what they think we are. The shuttle docked with a soft click. Minutes later, the delegation entered the main conference room of the Resolve. There was High Speaker Velos, tall and delicate with her 4 trembling arms. There was Ambassador Rova, her feathers pressed flat against her body in what Do-hyun had learned was a sign of stress. And there was Trade Minister Gallows, a small furry creature who kept looking at the human guards, like they might eat him at any moment. Admiral Kan Myrae was already waiting for them. At 60 years old, she was the commander of Earth's entire space fleet. She had silver hair cut short, eyes like chips of black ice, and a reputation for never losing her temper. She also never smiled, and she was not smiling now. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried easily across the room. "Please sit." The aliens sat. Their chairs had been specially designed to fit their different bodies. The Pelion perched on a raised seat. The small furry trade minister climbed onto a cushioned platform. High Speaker Velos folded her 4 arms into her lap. "We have reviewed your message," Admiral Kao began. "You want humanity to help you fight the swarm." "Yes," Velos said. Her translator turned her words into careful, formal English. "We need your unique abilities." "You mean our violence," Do-hyun said. The aliens flinched. But Rova raised her head. "Yes," she said honestly. "We need your violence. We need your aggression. We need whatever it is that makes your species able to face death and keep fighting." Admiral Kang leaned back in her chair. "Let me make sure I understand. 30 years ago, your people found Earth. You studied us. You decided we were too dangerous to contact openly. You watched our wars. You recorded our history. And now, when the galaxy faces destruction, suddenly the dangerous primitives look useful. Trade Minister Gallo squeaked nervously. We meant no insult. It was simply a matter of caution. It was fear, Admiral Kang said. You were afraid of us. And now you want the thing you feared to save you. She paused. I'm not offended. I'm simply stating the truth. Silence filled the room. Then Captain Yoon spoke up. What exactly do you want us to do? We have 200 ships. You have 400,000. Even if our ships were 10 times better than yours, the numbers don't add up. High Speaker Velos leaned forward, her glassy skin showing the rapid pulse of her internal organs. We do not need your ships. We need your leaders. Your trainers. Your way of thinking. She took a deep breath. When our crews see the swarm, many will flee. They cannot help it. Fear is stronger than duty for most species in the galaxy. But your people, she shook her head in wonder. Your people run toward danger. You face your fears. You seem to almost enjoy the challenge of death. We don't enjoy it, Do-hyun said quietly. We just learned that running doesn't work. On Earth, if you ran from a predator, you died tired. Our ancestors figured out that standing together and fighting back was the only way to survive. Sergeant Major Cho Yoonji entered the room. She was 50 years old, built like a tank, with hands that had broken bones and saved lives in equal measure. She had been listening from outside. Sounds like they need NCOs more than admirals, she said. They need people who can teach their crews how to be scared and still do their jobs. Admiral Kang nodded slowly. She's right. This isn't about tactics or technology. This is about psychology. You want us to teach an entire galaxy how to fight when fighting goes against every instinct they have. Yes, Bellows said. Can you do this? The Admiral stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 9 million nightmare creatures were coming to end everything. The galaxy had 12,000 years of peace. Earth had 12,000 years of war. We can do it, she said finally. But understand this. If we're leading this fight, we're doing it our way. No committees. No votes. No debates while the enemy is at the gate. You give us command or you fight this war yourselves. The aliens exchanged looks. It was a hard thing to accept. They had built their civilization on consensus and cooperation. Giving power to a single species, especially one they barely knew, went against everything they believed. But the swarm was coming, and they had no other choice. Agreed, High Speaker Velos said. Earth will lead. The galaxy will follow. Admiral Kang finally allowed herself a small smile. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment their entire life. Then let's get to work, she said. We have a war to win. Lieutenant Baek Jisoo had seen many strange things in her life. She had fought in the Mars Uprising. She had survived the Europa Deep incident. She had once killed a genetically modified tiger with her bare hands during a zoo security failure on Earth. But nothing had prepared her for this. She stood on the bridge of the Pelion carrier Graceful Dawn, watching her new crew move around her. They were beautiful creatures, the Pelions, tall and covered in shimmering feathers of blue and gold. Their movements were smooth and graceful. Their voices sounded like music, and they had absolutely no idea how to fight. Let me understand this correctly, Jisoo said, keeping her voice calm. You have had warships for 6,000 years. You have guns that can destroy asteroids. You have shields that can block nuclear explosions. And in all that time, you have never once practiced using them in actual combat? The Pelion's second officer, whose name translated roughly to Bright Wing, ruffled his feathers nervously. Conflict is distasteful to our species. These ships were built as, how do you say, symbols. Things to show our enemies that we could fight, even though we hoped we never would. Showpieces, Jisoo said. Your warships are showpieces. Yes, exactly. Jisoo closed her eyes. She counted to 10 in Korean. Then she counted to 10 again. When she opened her eyes, her face was calm, but her voice was hard. Everyone to the simulation bay. Now, we start training in 1 hour. Similar scenes were happening across the entire Allied fleet. 2,000 human officers and soldiers had been spread among 400,000 alien ships. They found the same problems everywhere. On a Varth battlecruiser, Corporal Shin Woojin discovered that the crystalline beings had never heard of hand-to-hand combat. But why would we touch the enemy? They asked, their silicon bodies flickering with confusion. We have weapons that work from great distances. Because sometimes the enemy gets close, Woojin explained patiently. Sometimes your weapons fail. Sometimes you have to fight in spaces where guns are dangerous. And sometimes, he paused, thinking of the right words. Sometimes the enemy needs to look into your eyes and see that you are not afraid. The Varth considered this. Then their bodies flickered in a new pattern. You are saying that violence can be personal? Yes, Woojin said. And that makes it more frightening for your enemy. They're not just fighting machines. They're fighting someone who hates them enough to get close. On a medical ship, Dr. Kwon Hajin was teaching basic combat medicine to alien doctors who fainted at the sight of blood. She had to start from the very beginning, explaining that sometimes saving lives meant causing pain first. If a soldier is injured, you do not have time to be gentle, she said. You stop the bleeding. You seal the wound. You get them stable enough to survive. Being kind comes later. Being fast comes first. A small Makari doctor raised one of his 4 tiny hands. But what if the treatment causes distress? What if the patient screams? Then you let them scream, Hajin said firmly. A screaming patient is still alive. A quiet patient might be dead. You can apologize for the pain later. You cannot apologize to a corpse. Technical specialist Han Soo-young found that half the weapons on the ship she inspected had never been test-fired. Power systems were outdated. Targeting computers used software that was centuries old. She worked 18 hours a day, rebuilding, rewiring, bringing systems back to life that had been sleeping for generations. Why didn't you maintain these better? She asked a Galosian engineer. The small furry creature wrung his hands. Maintenance costs money, and we never thought we would actually need to use them. Soo-young shook her head. Well, you need them now. So let's get to work. The days passed. The swarm grew closer, and slowly something began to change. It started small. A Pelion gunner who hit her targets in simulation for the first time. A Varth warrior who learned to channel his fear into cold, focused anger. A Makari pilot who discovered that his small size made him perfect for flying through tight spaces where larger ships could not follow. The aliens watched their human instructors and learned something they had never known before. Courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was feeling the fear and fighting anyway. It was a choice, not a gift. Anyone could make that choice. Lieutenant Jisoo watched her Pelion crew run through their 100th combat drill. They were still scared. She could see it in the way their feathers trembled. But they held their positions. They followed orders. They fired when told to fire and held when told to hold. You're getting better, she told them. Brightwing looked at her with his large golden eyes. We are trying to be more like you. Jisoo shook her head. No, you're becoming better versions of yourselves. That's what this was always about. Not making you human. Making you brave. Across the fleet, something new was being born. It was not a human fleet with alien helpers. It was not an alien fleet with human leaders. It was something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. It was an army that had learned how to face its fears together, and it was almost ready to fight. The Threshold Nebula was a cloud of gas and dust that stretched across 3 light years. It was beautiful, with colors of purple and gold and deep red swirling through the darkness. Ancient civilizations had written poems about its beauty. Artists had tried to capture its majesty. Today, it would become a graveyard. Admiral Kang Mirai stood on the bridge of the Resolve, now designated as the flagship of the entire Allied fleet. Around her, 400,000 ships held position in careful formations. Every species in the Galactic Assembly had sent vessels. Every world had contributed what it could, and directly ahead, space itself seemed to tear open. The swarm arrived exactly when the sensors had predicted. They poured out of fold space like a river of nightmares. Each creature was a ship and a monster at the same time. The smallest were the size of fighters, with razor-sharp wings and bodies built for speed. The largest were carrier organisms bigger than moons, their bodies holding millions of smaller creatures inside. 9 million of them. The number was beyond imagining. Commander Park Do-yoon watched the sensor displays fill with red dots until the screen was almost solid crimson. Behind him, he heard someone gasp. Someone else whispered a prayer in a language his translator did not recognize. "Steady," he said quietly. "We knew this was coming." Admiral Kang activated the fleet-wide communication channel. Her voice would be heard on every ship, translated into every language, reaching the ears of every soldier in the Allied force. "All vessels. This is Admiral Kang." The channel crackled with the sound of 400,000 ships falling silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing. Every eye turned to their speakers. "I know what you're seeing on your screens," the Admiral continued. "I know the numbers look impossible. I know every instinct in your body is telling you to run. Good. That fear means you understand what we're facing. That fear means you're paying attention." She paused, letting her words sink in. 30 years ago, your people found my world. You called us primitives. You called us savages. You called us Deathworlders. And you were right. Earth is a world of poison air and crushing gravity. It's a world of storms and earthquakes and predators that hunt in the dark. Everything on our planet wants to kill us. It always has. Do-hoon watched the fleet-wide vital signs on his display. Heart rates were high. Breathing was fast. Fear was spreading through the fleet like a disease. But the Admiral was not finished. We survived anyway. We crawled out of caves with nothing but rocks in our hands. We faced animals with teeth and claws, and we won. We fought each other for 10,000 years, and we learned from every battle. We fell down 1,000,000 times, and we got up 1,000,001. The vital signs began to stabilize. Hearts were still pounding, but the panic was fading. Today, you're not fighting alone. Today, you have Deathworlders standing beside you. Human officers on your bridges. Human soldiers at your stations. Human blood in this fight. And I promise you something. Our voice dropped lower, becoming almost intimate, as if she were speaking to each soldier personally. We don't know how to give up. We never learned. It's not in our nature. When we're knocked down, we get up. When we're outnumbered, we fight harder. When everyone says it's impossible, we find a way. That's what Deathworlders do. That's who we are. The swarm was moving now. 9 million creatures began their advance, a wave of death rolling toward the Allied fleet. When I give the order to advance, you will advance. When I say hold, you will hold. And when this day is done, when the swarm learns what happens when they threaten the galaxy we protect, they will remember this moment forever. She took a deep breath. All ships advance to engagement range. Show them what we're made of. The fleet moved forward. Lieutenant Beak Jisoo felt her Pelion crew respond to her commands with precision. They were afraid. Their feathers shook. But they did not run. Corporal Shin Woojin stood with his Varth warriors, their crystalline bodies glowing with determination. They had never fought before. Today, they would learn. Dr. Kwon Hejin prepared her medical station, ready for the flood of casualties she knew was coming. Around her, alien doctors who had once fainted at blood worked with steady hands. Technical specialist Han Soo-yang watched her repaired weapon systems come online. Every gun she had fixed would fire today. Every shield she had upgraded would protect a crew. The two forces met. The universe exploded into light, and fire and chaos. Ships died in the first seconds. Creatures fell. The space between the two armies filled with wreckage and bodies and the terrible beauty of destruction. It was hell brought to life among the stars. But the Allied fleet did not break. For the first time in 8,000 years, the swarm faced an enemy that fought back with everything it had. An enemy led by Deathworlders. An enemy that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Sometimes, the only way out is through. The battle lasted 19 hours. 19 hours of fire and death and desperate fighting. 19 hours of impossible odds. 19 hours of fear and courage and sacrifice. When it finally ended, the Threshold Nebula was choked with the wreckage of millions of ships. But the Allied fleet still flew. Admiral Cam Myra sat in her command chair, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical force. There was a cut across her forehead that she did not remember getting. Her uniform was torn. Her hands trembled from the stress of commanding a battle that should have been unwinnable. Around her, the bridge crew was slowly beginning to breathe again. Some were crying. Some were laughing. Some simply stared at their screens in disbelief. Confirmed kill count on swarm forces, Commander Do-yoon reported, his voice hoarse. 8.7 million. Remaining swarm vessels are in full retreat. Full retreat. The word seemed impossible. For 8,000 years, the swarm had never retreated. They had never needed to. They simply consumed everything in their path until nothing was left. Not today. Allied fleet losses? The Admiral asked quietly. Do-yoon paused before answering. 137,000 ships destroyed. Another 90,000 with significant damage. He swallowed. Approximately 40 million casualties across all species. The weight of those numbers hung in the air. 40 million lives. Mothers and fathers. Children who would never grow up. Dreams that would never be realized. The cost of victory was almost too heavy to bear. But the alternative would have been the death of everything. Across the fleet, similar moments were happening. Lieutenant Beak Jisoo hugged her Pelion crew members, their feathers wet with tears they had never known they could cry. Corporal Shin Woojin sat among his Varth warriors, their crystalline bodies dimmed with exhaustion. But alive. Dr. Kwon Hejin had worked without stopping for 12 hours straight, treating wounds that ranged from minor cuts to missing limbs. She had saved 847 lives personally. She had lost 23. Each one of those 23 would stay with her forever. Technical specialist. Han Soo-yang found that 78% of the weapons she had repaired had survived the battle. The other 22% had been destroyed along with their ships. She did not know how to feel about that. The victory celebrations began slowly. At first, no one could quite believe it was over. The fear was too deep. The losses were too great. But gradually, as the reality sank in, the fleet came alive with joy. Ships of every species flew in formation, their lights blinking in patterns of celebration. Crews who had never met each other sent messages of congratulation and thanks. Old enemies discovered they had fought side by side without knowing it. New friendships were born in the fire of shared survival. 1 week later, the memorial was built. It floated in space at the heart of the Threshold Nebula, in the exact spot where the battle had been fiercest. The structure was simple, a great ring of white stone inscribed with names. Millions of names. Every soldier who had fallen, regardless of species. Human names sat beside Pelian names. Vorath heroes were listed next to Makari pilots. The Galaxians who had died remembered alongside the tall, glassy beings who had once led the assembly. In death, there was no difference between them. They had all been fighters. They had all been brave. At the center of the ring stood a statue. It showed a human soldier in battered armor, one hand reaching down to help up a fallen alien. The alien species was left vague on purpose. It could have been any of them. The inscription at the base was simple. We came from death. We chose life. We fought together. High Speaker Velos stood before the memorial, her forearms raised in the deepest gesture of respect her species knew. Beside her, Admiral Kang looked older than she had before the battle. The weight of command had taken something from her, but there was also pride in her eyes. You taught us something, Velos said. Not just how to fight. You taught us how to believe we could fight. For thousands of years, we thought conflict was something to avoid at any cost. You showed us that some things are worth any cost. Admiral Kang nodded slowly. That's what Deathworlds teach you. When your planet is trying to kill you from the day you're born, you learn to fight back. Or you die. There's no middle ground. Will the swarm return? Velos asked. Maybe. Probably. Kang shrugged. But now you know you can beat them. That changes everything. Fear is only powerful when you think you can't win. You've proven you can. The ceremony ended. The delegates returned to their ships. The fleet began the long journey home, but nothing was the same. In the years that followed, humans became full members of the Galactic Assembly. Their officers trained alien military forces across 1,000 worlds. Their doctors taught combat medicine. Their engineers upgraded weapon systems that had been collecting dust for centuries. And slowly, the galaxy began to change. Species that had never imagined fighting began to develop their own warrior traditions. Cultures that had hidden from danger learned to face it. The fear that had defined the assembly for 12,000 years was replaced by something new. Confidence, strength, the knowledge that even the impossible could be overcome if you refuse to give up. Commander Park Dohin retired 5 years after the battle. He returned to Earth, to a small house by the sea, where he could watch the waves crash against the rocks. Sometimes other veterans visited him, humans and aliens alike. They would sit together and remember the friends they had lost. Do you think it was worth it? A young Pelian officer asked him once. The cost was so high. Do-hyun looked out at the ocean. On Earth, the sea had always been dangerous. Storms and waves and creatures in the deep that could swallow a man whole. But humans had learned to sail it anyway. They had built ships and navigated by stars and crossed waters that should have killed them. That was what Deathworlders did. They faced the impossible and found a way. Yes, he said finally. It was worth it. The galaxy is free. Our children are safe. And everyone who died, they died for something that mattered. He smiled, old and tired and at peace. That's all any of us can ask for. Above them, the stars burned bright. The galaxy was at peace. And somewhere out there, in the cold dark between the stars, the survivors of the swarm still remembered the day they learned to fear, the day the Deathworlders stepped in to save the galaxy. And showed everyone what courage really meant.